Let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you to all of you for joining us here today for an important discussion on how to stay safe in the age of artificial intelligence. My name is Holly Mazzocca. I'm president of Bartlett Wealth Management, and it's my honor to be here to introduce today's guest speaker, Rebekah Michael. For those of you who are able to attend or watch the recording of Strategy Update back in November, you know that artificial intelligence has been a topic of discussion for our Bartlett team for quite some time. However, today's webinar is going to take a little bit of a different view on the cybersecurity landscape. We've heard from you, and we recognize that we've talked about this idea of cybersecurity a lot. However, it's always important to stay at the front of the curve of where the technological developments are coming and how cyber criminals are using them to go about their malicious scams. We recognize that cyber criminals are adapting their scams to utilize artificial intelligence in ways that we've never seen before. Our goal for today's presentation is to arm you with the tools you need to be aware of cyber scams and to protect yourself from these online criminals in the age of AI. With that, I'm pleased to introduce today's subject matter expert, Rebekah Michael, from the University of Cincinnati School of Information Technology and Ohio Cyber Range Institute. Rebekah will discuss how AI is impacting the cybersecurity landscape and what you can do to stay safe. We will be leaving time at the end of today's conversation for Q&A, so please utilize the link at the bottom of your Zoom screen to pop in your questions as we go throughout the presentation, and then Rebekah and I will call through those and bring those up at the end of today's webinar. Rebekah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Holly, and thank you so much, Bartlett Wealth Management, for having me today. This is an important topic for all of us to stay safe, and of course, very special to me. This is where I have spent most of my career for the past 25 years. So as Holly said, I am a professor here at the University of Cincinnati, and I'm the executive staff director of the Ohio Cyber Range Institute. So the Ohio Cyber Range Institute is actually a statewide mission in Ohio that we are trying to get ahead of the cybersecurity needs for local government entities, for industry, for schools, and also training the next generation of people who will be securing our nation, our state, our companies, and all of us. I am from the Cincinnati region and worked in industry for about 15 years before coming back to the University of Cincinnati about 10 years ago to pursue some of these research and application of cybersecurity initiatives. So today I will talk about just a little overview of AI. I will give a little overview of cybersecurity and how that is integrated together, and one of the reasons that we are so vulnerable. Excuse me, I have allergies, and so my voice sometimes goes in and out. But then we will talk about some specific use cases where we have 3 different cyber attacks that have been enhanced by AI. And then we'll talk about ways that we can protect ourselves, and then what to do if you have been a victim of a cyber attack. And then, as Holly said, we will have Q&A at the end. So keep those questions coming. Love to answer any questions that you have. All right, so let's talk about AI. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is the hottest buzzword since ChatGPT came out back in November of 2022. But it does start way back in 1949 with Alan Turing and the Turing test. If anyone has seen The Imitation Game, the movie, that focused on Alan Turing, but didn't talk much about the Turing test. So he was ahead of his time and imagined a time when machines would be smarter or as smart as humans, and then we wouldn't be able to differentiate between the two. So the Turing test was kind of a philosophical test where if we asked a series of questions, could we tell the difference between a machine and a human? We have since then really worked on advancing artificial intelligence as we have grown computing and networking. The machine learning, deep learning, generative AI or Gen AI, large language models or LLMs and ChatGPT, all of those things fall under this umbrella of AI or artificial intelligence. And we've been working to make our lives easier with these technologies. So when we talk about machine learning or deep learning, we are really just talking about putting in a lot of data into a system so that the computer can learn what to do from previous examples. And as we get more information into the digital world, we have more data to train these models on. And so those are called large language models because most of the information we hold today has been digitized. And so we have these computer systems that are training on all of the information that humans have generated. And so you can imagine that we are able to come up with really intelligent machine design. But back in the 90s, we were using this. We've been using AI for mortgage applications, to evaluate risk for insurance. We also had IBM's Deep Blue that beat the chess champion, which was big news. So we have had these things in the works, but it was very expensive. And it was really focused on just a couple of areas. So that generative AI technology that really came back to everyone with ChatGPT in November 22 was the first time that people were able to experiment with it. And so it became a big news topic and became something that we are all paying attention to because it is easy, it is cheap, and we all have access. But it's all a good thing. This area of research is improving our productivity. It's allowing us to get the administrative work done by computers and leading to new advancements because computers can process a lot more data than we can. And when we are looking at advancements in medicine, looking at new diseases or other things that impact humans in a negative way, artificial intelligence, it can help us to solve a lot of the problems that we have. However, cyber criminals also are taking advantage of artificial intelligence. And so it's something we have to pay attention to in cybersecurity. So this is where I live, in the cyberspace. Cybersecurity, when most people hear that term, they think of math, or they think of something complex, or they think of a person in a hoodie, kind of like the picture, who is sitting on a computer for days on end trying to get into systems. And all of those things are applicable to cybersecurity, but really it is just a function of the security portion just in our digital world. We focus on protecting information on any digital asset and on any network. So your cell phones, your computers, of course, but also your smart speakers and anything that is connected to our networks and the internet. What we are trying to protect is highly valuable. So in 2024, it was estimated that cybercrime accounted for $6 trillion, which is the GDP of what would be the third largest nation. It's estimated that in 2025, it will be $10.5 trillion. So it is growing at just a crazy scale, and it's because most of our banking, most of our financial assets are of course, in the digital space. And because our cyber criminals are becoming much more intelligent, much larger, and funded at a higher level. And it's because it's just a crime of opportunity. It is more profitable than other illegal activities, of course, and is the greatest transfer of economic wealth in history. The cyber criminals with the hoodie is no longer really an effective way of doing this. This is done by real criminal organizations, nation states, and it is a worldwide effort. You can do it from anywhere. So, multinational cooperation as well. And so this is kind of the scary part, right? And then kind of combined together with AI and cybersecurity, this is something that we have been paying very close attention to because it is continuing to advance and expand this threat landscape. Back when we had very simple messages like what you see here from the Skynet virus, or from the emails that were poorly written from the Nigerian prince, that is a very classic example, it was easy to spot these viruses, these attempts to convince people of doing something that made them vulnerable. Was very easy to spot. And so we did a pretty good job at training everyone on cyber hygiene. Think before you click, don't answer an email and give information unless you know the source. And if you get a virus, tell someone, remove it, get some software that will help you with that. Also, software companies became smart about security and the customers demanded it, so they started to build with security in mind. And so that is a great thing that we've done. But then, of course, cyber criminals became more intelligent, and with the advancements in artificial intelligence, they can be both very quick and very intelligent and write emails that are written as if they came from your boss or came from your partner or colleague or came from a family member. And what we found now is that that kind of one-on-one attack is much more effective than trying to send out these bots or these viruses. And so in 2024, the number of attacks that have increased have been on those person-to-person or artificial intelligence, most of the time, two-person attacks without the viruses that are attached to that, because software is so good at recognizing viruses or applications that shouldn't be there. And so you just have these criminal organizations who are training not the humans that are attacking each other, but rather training this artificial intelligence engine to do the research on people from LinkedIn, from social media, and from articles, and on companies, bringing that back and then generating these individual attacks. And just a side note here, this screenshot from Skynet is from the Malware Museum. We do collect this information about past viruses, about past scams, and it's an effort so that we can learn from it in the future. And one of the reasons that we are so insecure in this space, whether it is an individual person, whether it's a virus, or whether it is AI enhanced, is because the internet is inherently insecure. We started the internet way back in the ARPANET days, which actually wasn't that long ago, right? It's just 54 years ago that we started this idea. It was meant for sharing information, and that concept continued. We took the approach of communication. Just like telephone wires, we were building in these digital wires so that we could share data rather than just voice. And the openness of the system, the infrastructure that we built was intentional. because we didn't think about security. We didn't think about the bad actors that could come. 54 years later, here in 2023, the image on the right is showing you what we are trying to visualize as the internet. And it is so large. There are so many people who are connected from so many different sources that it's almost impossible to visualize anymore. It's also almost impossible to know where everyone is connected from. And so the kind of progression from the left side to the right side in those 54 years, it wasn't managed, it wasn't planned, and it wasn't done by a certain company or a certain government. It was piecemealed together so that we could be connected. And by the time we realized that there were security issues back in the 80s and 90s, it had gone on for too long. It would have been incredibly expensive and nearly impossible to start over. So we've layered security on top of this network. But of course, that's not ever going to be as good as building in security. And so the layer of security that we have on top and we continue to build needs to be enhanced by the people who are interacting with the network. And so it is, unfortunately, all of our responsibility to protect ourselves, to protect our information, and to protect those around us, because we are all connected in this. And so if we are attacked, if we are vulnerable, then everyone we're connected to is vulnerable. So I wanted to go through that just being an overview. I wanted to go through some specifics so that we can think about practical ways that we can protect ourselves and to think about this future look of enhanced attacks with AI. And I don't intend to scare you, but rather looking at simple ways that we feel more comfortable with a lot of this terminology and with things that we can do so that we can improve our cybersecurity posture, but also things to do to find more information. So we have heard, most of us have heard about email attacks, of course. These have been going on for a very long time. As before on the slide on cybersecurity, we had the classic example of the Nigerian prince or somebody asking for money. Those have been around since the late 80s. But even though we have a lot of education in that area, 90% of the attacks start with an email. And those email attacks are usually called phishing. And phishing is just, I'm going to send an email out and I am phishing to see if somebody will click on a link, will download an attachment or an application, or provide me with information that they shouldn't provide me because I'm a bad actor. And so like the lore, I am acting like I am someone you know or a company that you know. The other things that you might hear about, smishing or whaling or quishing or anything related to that, those are all similar attacks, but they're through different applications or through different media. So phishing would be an email. Smishing is a text message, because a lot of us will receive text messages from a company saying your order's been delayed, click on this link. And so they have a similar opportunity to get you to interact with them through a text message. And whaling is just a form of going after a very influential person or somebody who is higher value, and quishing is QR codes. And so any of those attacks are all about the same techniques. And although this has been going on for quite some time, as I said, we continue to find that this is the most common ways for a cyber attack to start. And that's because this is how we live. We get a lot of emails, we have to respond quickly, but also because AI has been able to make these very realistic. It is almost impossible to spot now an email that is legitimate versus one that is not. And so the study that was done about 1.5 years ago indicated that AI has a 54% better click-through rate than any human-generated email. And that is for legitimate and illegitimate emails. So we are, of course, using AI to enhance our general communication for our work and just to make our lives easier. And so those emails, those documents, it's the same thing for cyber criminals. They're doing this with the same AI engines. And the reason that they're so effective is they can mimic a person's writing based on samples of writing. And what we need to look for is the email address that it was sent from, and also making sure that before we interact with that email, that we do verify that source, which can be time consuming and doesn't always fit into our everyday life. But we can take a look at the email address that it was sent from, and we want to look for things such as, exact matches with the email address, and things such as the signature of the email. And when in doubt, the email is not the issue, right? That you've received it and you've read it, but it's interacting with it. So when in doubt, we can always pick up the phone and call someone to make sure they sent that email and that we want to interact with it. Because we also know that at times when we are compromised, people can send emails from our email inbox. And so that is kind of a double whammy where we get a well-written email and it comes from the legitimate email address. And so it's not a safe place to say that if it came from my email address, that it is inherently safe. So we have to look for those interaction points, the actual link that we would click on, the download of the attachment, or providing any information back. And QR codes that you see here, you've probably seen these around town. You'll see them at grocery stores and at coffee shops and at schools, because it's a very easy way to get someone to go to a website or to fill out a form. But because they don't have the actual URL that they want you to visit underneath the QR code, you don't know where it's supposed to take you. And so you don't know how to verify if this is an okay thing to click on. And so if you were to scan this QR code and click on it, it just goes to Bartlett, to the website. So this is legitimate. But if I printed this out and put it up as a flyer, there are a lot of bad actors who are going around with QR code stickers, and they are putting it on top of that flyer so that when you click on it, you're actually going to a form that looks similar. They're asking for similar data, but then they are using it as bad actors. So make sure that you think about the QR code that you are clicking and you take a look at the link that pops up and make sure that that is going to a legitimate website. So in the case of the deep fakes that we have heard about, there are a couple of different types of deep fakes. Most of the time when we hear about deep fakes, we hear about video and that's been posted and it's not actually Tom Cruise, or it's not actually an actor or a famous person, but it is taking videos of that person and putting them into another person, or putting them on top of other videos that they've done and changing the voice. That is the normal deep fake that we hear about in media. There's also the deep fake of just the voice. and phone hacks have increased it's 442% in the last 6 months of 2024. It's just astronomical how quickly this has grown. And the reason for this is because, again, AI has become affordable. It's become very cheap, and it is accessible by everyone. And voice is a very simple thing to try to mimic. It's much more simple than the video side of it. And so what people are doing is they are making phone calls. And the reason that this is a cybersecurity attack is because the phone call itself is coming from an AI voice. And they're calling using a computer, using a generated phone number. So you're not sure exactly where that's coming from. And they're usually asking you to interact with something that is online to give access to your personal or digital data. The social engineering aspect of cybersecurity has to do with learning about a given person so that you can mimic that person. And so we store so much information online about ourselves freely through social media, through LinkedIn, through other sources, and that information can be gathered. In addition, that information includes some voice and includes some video and pictures. And so all of that information is very easy for AI to grab and then put together as a digital profile of a person. However, with voice, even if you don't have those videos out there and they can't grab your individual voice, there are a lot of AI profiles that exist in the cyber criminal community that are just regional. And so for a particular part of the world, a particular region of that world, they will build in a profile of a person. And then that profile will call people who they think would be familiar with that person. One of the most common scams is the family member scam. And so you replicate a regional dialect. For example, I'm in Cincinnati. So they have a Cincinnati person, and they could replicate one of my children. And that phone call comes into me, and they say, I'm in need of help, and it's usually urgent. And it gets you to react emotionally so that you are not thinking critically and you want to act immediately. Oftentimes, they will ask you to send money through a digital platform, so very quickly a Cash App or a Venmo, or they will ask you to buy gift cards and send them, or send money in some other way. They have also asked people to send information to them that they very quickly need to get out of a situation, and so they need your social as that family member, especially a parent or a grandparent. 77% of victims of this kind of attack have lost money. Also, there are a lot of case studies where AI is calling people, immediately going to voicemail, where you think that the person just hung up, but they are immediately going to voicemail and replicating a voice that you might know, you might not know, and then asking you to call them back at a number. When you call back, you are oftentimes interacting with a human, but that number goes to not the organization or the person that you were trying to call. It then goes to a cyber criminal, and from there, they're trying to get information from you. It is an incredibly profitable scam and incredibly easy to do. So we do also have to pay attention when we are on the phone, just like emails, that if somebody is asking for information, we want to make sure that we call the number that we know for that person, or with the organization, we look up the number so that we can call that back. And then the final kind of state of deep fakes, as I said, were the videos and mapping that to a voice, either that is an AI generated voice or the voice of somebody else who is just trying to mimic that person's voice. This comes in the form of videos that are posted and trying to convince someone that, you know, what you see, of course you can believe, right? Which is not always the case. And trying to convince them of something that that person, you know, has not said, but also in a video call, much like this. It is usually easy for us to spot that, you know, the voice doesn't exactly match what the mouth is doing, or people aren't raising their eyebrows as expected, you know, that there are some signatures that we can find, but they are getting better and better, and it will become harder to tell. But what happens in a video call like this is that they are again trying to convince you to react emotionally with some urgency. And you oftentimes aren't as critical about the face matching up with the voice. So one of the examples was that at a company, there was a video call where the chief financial officer had several things that the team needed to transfer. And in total, they transferred $25 million because they thought it was a legitimate call from the CFO. Just from a study on older Americans, the fraud losses in 2023 were estimated at 3.4 billion. And that number is important because it is often underreported on how much money we are losing to these kinds of attacks. So the implication here is that we can't always trust the videos that we see. We do need to think about this, and just like the voice call, just like the email, before we interact with something and give information away, click on a link, download an attachment, and certainly before we operate any financial transactions, we do need to verify that source. So how do we do that? There's a lot of cybersecurity awareness training, and I'm sure that a lot of people have gone through that, where we talk about our passwords and how they need to be very complex to the point where we can't remember them and we don't know what they are, and we have to constantly reset them. All of those things are good, and that has gotten us to a better position where there is kind of a level of cyber hygiene. It's much like locking your car door, right? But then we've taken that further into this cyber mindfulness, where we are operating as if we trust no one, that, you know, everything is suspicious. We don't want to live that way, but in terms of how we interact with technology, we do need to be cautious, not scared, but cautious. And so it is a mind state of making sure that we are verifying and oftentimes using old technology to do that. One of the best things that we can do is make sure we still have that hard copy of phone numbers, and deciding to call someone instead of calling a number or you know, emailing someone from something that they've given us. We should have a list of numbers and a list of email addresses to contact someone as a hard copy. The reason we don't want to store that digitally is because that could become compromised, could be used against us, but also we could lose it. And so making sure we have that. Another thing is for family members, in the example where, you know, maybe my daughter calls me, I want to make sure that I have a code word with my family. So it's kind of like a fire drill where you go through and you make sure that everyone knows where to meet and how to get out of the house. We want to make sure that if these things are becoming more common, if these attacks are becoming more common, we know the code word that we can share to say, this is me. And then generally on our computers, but also on all of our smart devices and phones, we want to make sure that we are updating our software immediately. By the time that a software company realizes that there is a security hole in an application and they have spent time to fix it and they release it to you, it has been at least a month since that security hole has been known to cyber criminals. So when you receive that, make sure that you update that immediately. And don't forget about everything that's connected in your home, from speakers to a thermostat on a fish tank. And the reason I use that specific example is because a casino was hacked a couple of years ago because they had a smart thermometer in their fish tank. They had it connected to the casino's network that all of their financial transactions went through as well. Most of us have a home network. A lot of companies have one network, and all of the information that goes on that network is in the same place. So if I have something that is not very secure because it's not updated, like a thermometer in a fish tank, then hackers can get into that. And then once they are in to the network, then they can see all of the other traffic. For example, the financials of a casino. They were able to steal millions of dollars from this casino, and it was simply because of that smart device that they had in their fish tank. And then making sure that you have backups of all of your photos, all of your documents, all of your data. There is a website that will help take you through that to make sure that your data is protected. And they call it the 3-2-1 backup, which is just a system to make sure that you back up often and that you back up to at least 2 different areas, and that you have a backup stored of important documents that is disconnected. Because again, if something is connected to the network, it is potentially vulnerable. And then multi-factor authentication makes it so that you are not just relying on a password, which we know we need to have unique accounts and we need to have complex passwords. But the password length is the most important, and we can find a system for that. But we don't want to use the same account and the same password on a school website, for example, to fill out a big sale form that we would use in our banking app. So what multi-factor authentication does is it gives you another layer just in case that has happened, or just in case your password is cracked. Because given enough time, all passwords can be cracked. So multi-factor authentication makes sure that you have a device or you have a code that is another layer of protection outside of just that password. And then, as I said, we're suspicious, right? The kind of personal, trust no one, and that we go through and make sure we know the accounts that we have, and we do an audit of those things. I know that when I do an annual audit, I usually find something that I didn't really mean to sign up for. It doesn't cost me any money, so I don't see it, but I get to see those accounts that I have out there. And any account that you have just makes you more vulnerable. And then we have some other resources for you to look at from Cyber Mindfulness and CISA. And then if something bad happens, it's okay. Bad things happen, and we don't want to be embarrassed by that, but we do want to report it. Most of these things are underreported, and so to help others and to help yourself, make sure that you're reporting anything that happens. Local law enforcement would like to know. And then there is a link to FBI reporting as well. And then directly from Bartlett Wealth Management, if there is anything that is related, your advisor is there for you. So make sure that you are contacting, again, with that hard copy of phone numbers, your Bartlett advisor through their work phone or contacting them at their work email address. And then we just have this list of resources in case you want to know more. The case studies that I discussed are listed here. And then this first one, the world's largest data links, will show you the growth in data links since 2004. And so that is significant. It makes us all feel a little better that, wow, this really has grown in a short period of time. And so it's okay that we are struggling to get a hold of it, and that we are working on this. And so it is starting to become that the good people have just as many resources and the motivation to kind of defeat the criminals. So that is a brief overview of this very large topic. And I see that we have several questions, so I'm happy to answer those. But if you have any additional questions, my information was on that other slide, and so feel free to reach out.
Great. Well, thank you, Becca, so much. And we do have a number of questions flowing in here, and we will be sharing out all these resources afterwards, so everyone will have the website links and Becca's contact information. So a question here, is the Apple Face ID safe? Is it more secure than passwords or two-factor authentication?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. It is more secure. So whenever you are using biometric data, and so Face ID, thumbprint, anything that you are is what we call it, then that is going to be more unique and it's going to be harder to fake. However, and I say this in the new world, right? In the past couple of years, we have seen cyber attacks where software was installed on phones, and the software was grabbing the biometric data from the Face ID from those phones. And then that information was being used for biometric access into other accounts that the person had. So nothing is 100%. Once that data is found and they can compare it against something, then it is potentially vulnerable. So what I would say is using two things is better than using one thing. So thus the multi-factor authentication. Now, getting access into your phone is fairly secure because you have that device with you most of the time, right? And somebody who steals that phone, they have to be within proximity to you. So it's not something that is out there. But once you use biometric data for an internet resource or something that anyone could get into, then that is potentially vulnerable without multi-factor.
What kinds of attacks are home Wi-Fi networks incapable of stopping?
Yeah, that is a great question. So your home network is vulnerable from several points of view, but the two most common is when you receive your router, so the thing that connects you to the internet, you either purchase it yourself or you get it from your internet service provider. And that router comes with a default password. All of the manufacturer's default passwords are published on open websites that anyone can go to. And that was first intentional because people would forget it and then they wanted to see it. And so isn't that a nice world that we can just do that? But then what is the purpose of the password, right? But it was just supposed to be a default, and then you need to change that as a home network owner. But it requires all of us to have that knowledge of how to do it, and they don't have great instructions. And so one of the links that I have shows you how to configure your network. And so that is on CISA's website, just to change the default password. And then you have to write it down because of course you can't look it up. And then the other way is that you have one network, as I said, with the casino and the thermometer. You have one network where you do all of your work. So from video games to financial to others, you are having the same vulnerability, right, for your banking information as you do for looking up a cooking recipe. So what you want to do is segment your network. So have one network, and this is easy to do within the configuration page of your router. So have one network for guest access. Anyone who comes over, they can access a network that you don't do your banking on, and for your smart devices. And then, depending on what kind of use you have, you may want to have one that is just for the kids, or, kind of segment that off so that you don't have the same data running around on the same wire where you could potentially grab that for nefarious uses.
Great. Are tools being developed to help us identify deepfakes in real time? i.e.,
Yes.
I'm thinking of a tool that a phone or internet company might deploy on our behalf while taking a phone call or when opening an email.
Yes, great question. Yes, we do have a lot of tools that are being used. Those are, most of those are not commercially available, but of course, the antivirus software companies are very interested in this. And so they are bringing in that information into existing antivirus software. As far as telecom with voice, I'm not aware of anything on the kind of smartphones themselves, but there is a lot of software on mobile devices, and that is the same antivirus software. And so while I'm on that, with a mobile device, you do want to make sure that you have antivirus software on your mobile device. Android it does a pretty good job of making sure that they have some security holes filled. Apple does a good job of having those security holes filled, but you need an additional antivirus software.
A question here on password managers is using the Apple Passwords app to manage passwords safe. And I would add on to that password manager apps that are out there like LastPass, for instance.
Those are great because you don't have to remember all of those passwords. And so it is more likely for someone to have a unique password for every account that they have if they use a password manager. That is the reason for them. It's kind of like if you are given medication from a doctor, it's compliance, right? So a medication might be better for you if you take it every hour on the hour, but nobody's going to do that, right? Just like have a separate account, remember your passwords, so you have 100 of them and you actually remember them. That's the best. But because we are not capable of that, then a password manager is the next best. Where that is an issue is you have access to that password manager, and once you get in, you have all of those accounts. So you have to really make sure that the account that you use for the password manager and the password and you're using multi-factor authentication are all secure, and you don't lose that.
Question here on phone spoofing. I know you touched on this a little bit, Becca, but what are the best protocols you recommend if you suspect a message is not actually coming from the person associated with that phone number?
Yeah, absolutely. They're really hard to tell, and it can be a terrible feeling for you. And way back in the day, this happened to a family member of mine, and called me crying. So she knew she could call me, and so she did that. And so we talked through it, and we called the person back. Using the phone number that she had for the person. It took us a while to find it. It was, somebody who she didn't interact with every day, so it was hard for her to know if that was that person's voice or not. And again, they put you in this emotional state where you feel like you need to, interact immediately. What I would say is that hard-coded, number, or if it is, for example, somebody calling and saying, hey, this is IT from given company, and we need you to do something. Make sure that you look up that company and call them back at the number that you find for that company. And so it is critical just to kind of think about it for a minute. Don't react emotionally, hang up the phone and call them back at a number that you can find legitimately.
And I would add, Becca, note on legitimate. We had a client recently share with us that her husband Googled, phone number for Visa, and the bad guys are paying for advertisements that pop up as a sponsored ad. So don't look on Google and go to what is sponsored. I would actually recommend never clicking on a sponsored link unless you really know exactly where it's taking you to. Scroll down a little bit further and go to the original website, or even better, log in to your account with that institution and go to the client space, or look on the back of your card and find that phone number. I was a little surprised to hear that they're paying for advertisements for this.
Absolutely. And Google has a process to verify those ads, but several instances have been found where Google thought it was legitimate as well, and so allowed the sponsored ad. So absolutely, I agree with you, Holly. Don't click on the sponsored ad, and don't click on the first link. If it should be easy to verify that an online presence is that company. And so a lot of companies will buy multiple domains. So if I am, Bartlett.com or but attackers will find something that is similar. And so we want to make sure that whatever that URL is taking you to isn't just similar, but it is the actual address. And if you have a contact, of course, for someone, definitely call them and verify the URL.
Great. Is there a specific role for you if you're on the board of a company, a school? I would add a nonprofit. What sort of fiduciary responsibilities do board members have as it relates to cybersecurity?
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot of change in cyber law and laws that cover different industries. There are already laws that cover different industries like financial and schools and such, to protect certain data. And so as a board member, you may not have a direct role with that, but at least one that's not legally binding. But we want to make sure that all of the opportunities are given to people to protect all of the information in that organization. I work with a lot of nonprofits, of course, a lot of schools and government entities where we do cyber mindfulness training. So that was not this presentation, but that is something that most people want to do at least annually, and we recommend 3 times a year, so that they improve their cyber hygiene throughout the organization. Again, it's not just an IT issue, right? It's protection for everyone. And so on the school side, we need to protect the student information, because that is incredibly valuable to people. It's not just the financial side, and any personally identifiable information for most organizations, we want to make sure we're protecting that.
I think that's a great point, Becca. So this Ohio Cyber Range Institute can help people if you are on the board of a nonprofit and you're maybe worried about their cyber hygiene. I will say that we all recognize cybersecurity can be an expensive endeavor. There's a reason that Google just went out and paid billions of dollars for a company called Wiz to help their clients protect themselves in the cyberspace. And nonprofits are notoriously underfunded and resource constrained, and the bad guys know that. So what we see is that sometimes nonprofits may, not have all the resources there. So I'd encourage them to utilize the resources that are out there to really get that training from the experts in that second layer of the cyber audits, because it is really important. I would say, though, that also goes back in some ways to the non-tech aspects of how you can protect against this. So recently we saw a situation where someone was impersonating a nonprofit. They had hacked into the nonprofit situation, into the computers, and were pretending to be someone that they weren't. And by knowing the client really well, we caught that with multiple layers of protection. So that was another question that came up in a couple of different ways, is how is Bartlett protecting our client information and our client investments through our cyber hygiene. And I think that's a great opportunity to bring up a very important person at Bartlett, our Director of Information Technology, Matt Whalen, who spends hours upon hours upon hours of every day worrying and obsessing over this. And at Bartlett, we have many, many internal systems and processes to do two things. Number one, keep the bad guys out. And number two, help to identify and prevent fraud. So we do a lot of internal training for employees using a system called Arctic Wolf that is always in front of us. And Arctic Wolf gives us a cyber hygiene score. They also go through and do a lot of the phishing exercises that Becca brought up. So our employees are tested on that. And I'm proud to report that Arctic Wolf shared that Bartlett consistently has one of the top, if not the top, cyber hygiene scores of any of the companies they work with. It's also, which is really, really incredible. We use a number of items in the way we build our networks and build security into our systems. I tried to get Matt to give me all the secret sauce to share with you all today, and he said that it's protected under lock and key and in a safe, also kept very securely so that the bad guys can't try to recreate that and get into anything. So I think that's really important. It's also a big reason that we work with the outside custodians that we do. So for many of our clients, they're working with Charles Schwab, Fidelity, or a large bank such as a Fifth Third or a US bank that are investing millions upon millions of dollars into cyber hygiene and making sure to keep those bad guys out. But I would say that it really comes down to this idea of being on top of it with our clients of, when we think that something's not quite right, hanging up the phone, calling them back, verifying. And we are the ones who are often catching the bad guys, either directly that they're trying to impersonate someone, or indirectly where maybe a client's been caught up in one of the scams we've talked about here today. And we're the one to help say, let's take a deep breath. Let's call your nephew back on the number that you have for him and see if that's really him calling. So I think that that's where we are really helpful and really critical in that process. This whole idea of re-verification, of slowing yourself down, assuming guilt until proven innocent when it comes to the cyber world, working with outside consultants when you're a business to work with the outside experts. So it's not all at Bartlett, it's not all on Matt's back. While we have a fantastic internal team, we work with a very wide range of outside experts to stay on top of all the scary things the bad guys are doing. So we are at the hour. Becca, we had a number of other questions about gift card scams, voice recognition. There is a question on using, should you use voice recognition as a means of access versus a numeric text for a multi-factor authentication? Do you have a comment on that, Becca, if it's better to use voice?
Again, it goes back to the biometric data, right? So voice would be considered that, just like the face identification. And so there is a SIM swapping technology that somebody can fake your number. So that is the real risk with text verification, or a code which could be figured out fairly quickly if we're using a 4-digit code. So voice is still more effective. But as we get the deep fake technology enhanced, that could change. So as long as you're having multiple, as you said, defense in depth, right? Multiple sources, that is your best bet.
Great. Well, thank you again, Becca, for joining us here today. And thank you to all of you for joining us. As a friendly reminder, if there's ever anything that gives you concern, makes you say, please take a moment, take a deep breath, call your Bartlett team. We're here to help. We're here to help you sort through it, to really analyze if this is something that we need to respond to, and we can help pull in resources along the way to help with that analysis as well. So following up on today's webinar, a survey is going to pop up. It'll ask you for feedback. We appreciate your response to help us continue to make these events for you better. We'll be sure to send out all of the resources that Becca shared today with you as well as a recording of this event. So we encourage you to share this with others in your life who are out there in the cyber world. And as we've seen today, even if you don't have a large cyber profile, people have a way of finding you. So stay safe out there, reach out to us with questions, and thanks again for joining us.